It's more biological than you think, because a lot of times I talk about subjects that are mostly biological in nature. This is one of those things that is really, really important. And if a patient doesn't have support, affectionate support in their lives, then nothing we do is really going to matter that much. It's like trying to teach somebody to walk who doesn't have feet or prosthetics, okay? I mean, there's some things you really need to have in order to get to a better place. And affection, love, and belonging are the two most important ones, okay? And we're gonna kind of go over the evidence that supports that. Now, we live in an unusual time in history, and that the practices of our culture run antithetical to our needs. All right, they're the opposite. The behaviors and practices that are encouraged and demonstrated actually end up taking away from our capacity to experience love and belonging and purpose and respect and self-respect and you name it. I mean, all of our core needs that we have a culture that's going the other way. All right, and this makes our job more challenging because a lot of what we do, it becomes psychoeducation. We have to teach a retarded population how to live. And what I mean by that is that, I don't mean retarded in the pejorative sense, in that you have a certain level of growth that is necessary, and when that growth is retarded, it is stunted, and so you have a plant that doesn't reach its mature growth. What we have is a culture that, biologically we have all the tools to flourish and to do well, but they're not reaching their potential because we have a culture that is literally stunting their growth in multiple ways. All right? And so hopefully today what I'm going to be discussing is how our culture stunts our growth in the area of experiencing and being involved in love and belonging. Okay? So anyway, hopefully that introduces you to this. When I said I was going to do this presentation, I was thinking, well, I gave it before. I can just whip that out of my library, right? And I thought, how long has it been? And it was like 2001, 2002, and so yeah, right. Like I can quickly find those files, So last night I had to kind of write the whole thing all over again. But I talk about this so often that it wasn't too difficult to recreate. Now, I want to start by saying, I didn't start out in psychiatry. I went the other way. I was like Joan, I went the opposite direction, okay? I started out as an experimental pathologist. My early experiences with my PhD was cancer biology, actually. I did work on looking at the genetics of lymphoid neoplasia, of leukemia and lymphoma and stuff like that. So nothing to do with psychiatry or the brain or anything like that. And then after I went to medical school later, I went into radiology. Again, nothing to do with psychiatry whatsoever. I had an interest in the field, but the psychiatric field was really not very scientific. It was a lot of opinion. There was a lot of Freudian stuff, and I wasn't crazy about Freudian stuff because where's your double-blind, placebo-controlled trials? Okay, a lot of opinions going on, not science, okay? The medicines available for psychiatric treatment were horrible. They were horrible. Haldol and stelazine and tricyclic antidepressants and monoamine oxidase inhibitors. The side effects of the medicine were worse than the disease, okay? And then you had these psychiatrists who were in charge of these facilities, and they were acting like God, just lording it over their patients, treating them pretty much abusing people. All right, I mean, a lot of that was going on. Psychiatry was not a very compelling field, and I didn't have a lot of respect for the whole mental health industry till a friend of mine gave me a book called Reality Therapy by William Glasser, and I read it. I was really impressed. For the first time, it had my attention because what Glasser did was he basically presented a common goal for all mental health professionals. He says, look, the objective is to get our patients to experience fulfillment. If you get them fulfilled, happiness comes as a bonus. It's a buy one, get one free deal. All right? But fulfillment is the target. And he said there are 5 things necessary for fulfillment. Humans have 5 basic needs. Now, if they get enough of their 5 needs met, then they will be fulfilled. And if they get fulfilled, their anxiety and depression will diminish substantially. And he listed, and I don't agree with all 5, but it was a good place to start, because for the first time I'm thinking, you mean there's a common goal here? There are certain things that if you aim at these, you will help your patients experience fulfillment. He listed love and belonging, which, yeah, totally agree with that, and that's what we're talking about today. And the next one he listed here was power. I don't agree with that one. Power, that sounds pretty narcissistic. You know, you don't need to be the president to be happy. All right. And then he listed fun. And I'm going, fun? Why do you have pictures of pills under fun? You know, I realized that they're not pills, they're not M&Ms, they're actually balloons. So that was his, you know. But why did you use balloons that look like pills? Okay, anyway. Survival, which I thought was kind of stupid. It's like, well, duh. I mean, why are we even, of course they have to survive, or there's no, I mean, come on, they're not coming to the office if they're dead. So hello, all right. And then freedom, which, yes, I agree with that. So I've mixed it around over the years. I like the basic idea, though, that there are fundamental mental requirements in order to experience fulfillment. And so he was on the right track, and this really rang true for me. Now, one thing that would concern me later on when I became a psychiatrist, and I've been a psychiatrist for over 22 years now, one of the things that I added to this because of the literature support is purpose. And I put purpose at number 2. The reason purpose goes at number 2 is because if you take a look at suicide among people with no purpose is the highest of anything. I mean, basically it's across the board. Hands down, a major factor in suicide is purposelessness. Okay, so purpose goes at number 2. All right, so what I did basically is I moved it around. So love and belonging, number 1. Purpose at number 2. Now, under power, I said, okay, I'm not getting rid of power entirely, but power is composed of freedom, it's autonomy, plus respect. Freedom and respect. So both of those are on there. So power's still there, but it's divided into respect, which includes self-respect, and freedom or autonomy. Those are needs. Yeah?
I'm just thinking back to Maslow's
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs. Are these hierarchical, or they all exist at once?
No, well, no, these all exist at once.
Okay.
These are all exist at once. And they're different than Maslow. Yeah, Maslow and Viktor Frankl differed quite a bit. Okay, and this is more. I think that the author here is more along Viktor Frankl.
You don't have to take care of one before you.
No. These are all. If any one of these are deficient, then your patient's risk for an affective disorder is going to be higher. Okay, and then positive emotion. And that's where the fun, and I don't like the idea of fun because some people's idea of fun is going to Las Vegas and shooting a bunch of people, okay? So fun is not on the list. However, positive emotion is. And I'll talk about that later, but I will say right now about positive emotion is, we know now, you know, and I haven't done the psychocardiology talk here, I don't remember what I did or said, but psychocardiology is the study of what happens in your blood the minute you're having negative emotion. When you have a patient that is feeling anger, depression, anxiety, resentment, when they're stewing in negative emotion, immediately it causes blood changes that are bad for them. It is as if you are sipping on poison. So if you were to take a snapshot, somebody's like in the middle of their funk, and you take a blood sample, what you're going to find is elevated interleukin-6, elevated C-reactive protein, elevated VCAM, ICAM, von Willebrand's factor. All of those inflammatory markers are having a deleterious effect on your health. They are accelerating atherosclerosis. Your body is aging at an accelerated rate. It is increasing your risk for things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. Negative emotion is poisonous to your body. Now, having said that, positive emotion literally undoes the effects of negative emotion. And when I get to my next lecture, I'll talk about that. But I want to say that positive emotion is very important. So rather than call it fun, I would say positive emotion, joy, contentment, gratitude, awe, excitement. Those are positive emotions. And so they are necessary. If you go day after day, week after week with no positive emotion, it does affect your mood in a negative way. So these are requirements for human fulfillment: love and belonging, purpose, respect, freedom from excessive manipulation, and positive emotion. All right, so let's start with love and belonging. All right, affection is very mammalian. We need affection across the board. Not all species need it to the same extent, but all mammals require affection. This has been tested to death, and for sure this is an issue. When we have a patient, when I have a patient, on that first visit, on the initial assessment, there is always a question about what are your supports. Okay, do you have, what kind of relationship do you have with family members? What kind of relationship do you have with your friends? Does anyone genuinely care about me, or am I all alone? That's a very good question, because amazingly, when you get these people come in and nothing works week after week, month after month, they never get better. One of the things you want to know is what's going on socially, and you'll find out a lot of these people are not working. They're sitting at home, literally watching TV all day. They have no support. They don't get out very much. The friends that they have, oh yeah, I got a few buddies online that I talk to every now and then. That's not social support. Okay? So we got a lot of people in that situation, and we want to address that problem with them, okay? Because drugs and therapy aren't going to help you much if you're living in a fishbowl all by yourself. Crabs have no need for affection at no point. I mean, the mama crab will kick out several hundred babies, and as she's watching them skittering off, she has a snack. Guess what she snacks on? Yeah, she snacks on the babies, all right? Yeah, crabs are not affectionate at all. That's what they call crabs. Okay, they're very crabby, all right? You know, clean up your room or I'll eat you. Now, mammals, they pair bond. They pair bond with their children. Okay, they grow in affection for their children. After those babies are born, right away they're cuddling them, they're giving them affection, and the babies need that affection desperately. We've known for years, and I'm not going to repeat this stuff because you've all had this training, and so you know about reactive attachment disorder, I presume, and you know that children that don't get adequate affection, it has a devastating effect on them. The empathy, the ability to experience empathy, is very much dependent on the love, the affection that you receive during those first few years of life. And if there is significant deficiency in receiving affection during those first few years, you end up with a personality disorder, at least with antisocial, borderline, narcissistic, you know, something from the cluster B category, all right? At least that's what happens to you. And oftentimes it can be worse if the neglect is really, really that bad. So babies need that affection. 3 times in history, Brazil, Romania, and I forgot the other country, but because of war, a lot of orphans were generated. A lot of orphans were generated. And there were so many orphans that they had to house them in factory settings. And there weren't enough staff to go around and give all these babies affection. So what they did was they popped the infants in cribs, and they had the few nurses they had go around, change diapers, and pop bottles in their mouths. All right? Guess what happened to those infants? 100% mortality all 3 times. So if infants don't get affection during those first months, they die. Same thing with other primates. Primates and higher, we need affection. For life, they literally die without it. Now let's say that they got affection for those first periods, that first year, whatever, okay? But then the parent died or is gone, and now they're in an orphanage setting or they're in a neglect setting. What happens then? Well, the problem is that if you have a child and they cry and nobody attends to them, or they smile and nobody looks and smiles back, well then, now this is the model that was taught to me when I was in medical school, okay, or residency rather. What happens is, without words, the child concludes that they're not worth loving. All right? They're just not worth loving. And that is what they assume. And as they get older, they carry that shame with them for the rest of their life. That idea that while other people might be worth loving, I am not. And so they spend a lot of their life asking the question, what is it about other people that makes them worth loving but not me? And so what they do is they look at externals. They look at how cute other kids are, how talented they are, all right, how funny they are, how athletic they are, and they become very external. And as you get older, if you value people according to externals, what does that do to relationships? Yeah, it's devastating to relationships when everything is external like that. So reactive attachment disorder can be pretty damaging. Now, today we have a lot of divorce. So the nuclear family is very much in trouble. I mean, to say in trouble is okay, the body is cooling in the morgue. He's in trouble. I mean, that's how bad it is right now. Okay, so yeah, it's really, really bad. Anybody know what the divorce rate was before 1950 and before? Anybody happen to know that?
33.
The divorce rate?
33%.
Try 3 in 1,000. In 1950, it was 3 in 1,000. 3 in 1,000. Okay, that's what it was in 1950, and that was down a few percentage from 1945. But by 1950, it was 3 per 1,000. So prior to 1950, if you take a look at human society, you would definitely conclude that man is very monogamous, because once humans were married, that was for life. But yeah, prior to 1950, it was 3 in 1,000. Okay, now it's close to 1 in 2. Okay, close to 1. Close to 1 in 2. Okay. All right. Now the result of that is, one of the benefits of pair bonding like that is that love and belonging need is so important. And so you kind of had it built in with the family unit. You had a guaranteed love and belonging, or at least belonging. Okay, all right. So, you were not alone. You did not see yourself on an island in the middle of the ocean. Okay, and so the separation is pretty devastating, and it's important to bring it up because not a week goes by that we don't get referred people that are here because of a major hit in their love life. Okay, that's very, very common. I mean, if it wasn't for that, we would have a lot fewer patients. Okay. All right. Now the thing is because our culture has gone. I mean, the practices of our culture, the habits of our culture are so bad that people literally have to be trained as to how to have a friend. I mean, it's not just about romantic relationships. There's another talk that I had that I haven't done here, but I don't know where have I done it. I don't think I did it here. There is a presentation I did for a school, and it was about the effect of electronic devices. All right, and one of the problems is that the time that children used to spend playing with each other has been usurped with their devices. You no longer go into neighborhoods and see children playing with each other. When children played with each other, they had face-to-face contact with other human beings, and they learned about being a human. They learned about playing fair. They learned the consequences of not telling the truth. They learned about playing by the rules. They learned that it's not all about them. Okay? These were on-the-job trainings. Children's play has been studied for over 100 years. We know, from a scientific perspective, we know how important children's play is. And guess what they're not getting? And so what we see now is young people in their late teens and 20s that have the socialization skills of a 5-year-old, and they can't cope. And then when they make big social mistakes, what does everybody at school does? They post it. And now you have kids who don't want to go to school and have anxiety disorders because of the consequences of their poor socialization skills. All right, so this is a really bad time here. And so we end up, as far as relationships, we have to teach people how to be a friend, basic skills. All right? I mean, in order for them to have love or any relationships, they need to learn to be a friend. And that's a long process, but they didn't learn it when they were a kid. They didn't have those kinds of friends. They didn't spend enough time to learn it. And so the thing is, when you learn these lessons, when you're 8, 9, 7 years old, guess what? Let's say you cheat or you tell a big lie and you get caught in it. And all your friends know about it. Guess what? Next week, nobody cares. They forgot. It's a great thing about childhood is you can screw up all you want and your friends forgive you and you move on. Yeah, that happened. That was like a week ago. For children, that was like 6 years, man. And it's the past. Let's move on. Kids are very forgiving. Adults aren't. Adolescents aren't. Okay, and that's why it's important to make your big mistakes socially when you're a kid. All right. So I mentioned the self-worth. If you have a child because today, a lot of children end up going into daycare very quickly after birth. And if you have a really good daycare and a lot of staff and affectionate workers, then great. But if you don't, and your child does not receive adequate affection from the same caregivers, then the likelihood of developing a little bit of reactive attachment, yeah, we're seeing this. Okay, we're seeing this. And so we end up with children who at an early age have developed a very extrinsic self-worth model. The kids that are worth loving are from the wealthy families. They're cute, they're talented, they're smart. Those are the ones worth something. Those are the people worth having as friends. People like me, no. I've got to pretend. And I got to make sure nobody sees my faults, because if they see my faults, they're going to know I'm not one of the good people. They're going to know what I know. And so that's where a lot of your borderline stuff comes in, all right? I don't want anybody finding out that I'm really that bad, because they know from deep down that they're not worth loving, and so they don't want anybody finding out their imperfections. Now, the problem with that is you can't correct them. Anytime somebody points out a bad behavior, what do? Defense mechanisms, throw it back in their face, anger, all right? And so these are things, that's why DBT is so important, stuff like that, because you have to learn to deal with that stuff. You can't grow unless you deal with the faults. Everybody has them, and it's okay, but people with cluster B personality traits don't get that, and it affects their values. Now, intrinsic worth is the opposite of that. Do I have worth because of my skills and appearance and education, or is it intrinsic? Now, as you know, the human brain has 4 levels of consciousness, 4 things that give us our awareness, okay? We have at the bottom our lizard brains, all right? These are our basic instincts. All organisms have these. We gravitate towards what pleases us, and we gravitate away from things that displease us, that are not pleasurable, okay? That's our lizard brain. Not much emotion going on in a crocodile. Did anybody see Crawl, by the way? No, that's a good movie. It scares oh my goodness, that was a scary movie, okay. And the CG, you can hardly tell because these alligators look really real. Anyway, it's a good movie. Okay. But no emotion from alligators, okay. They show no emotion whatsoever. Okay, now rats and monkeys and mammals, they've got emotion going on. They got a limbic brain. So on top of your lizard instincts, now we have emotion. Now the rat brain and the lizard brain, they have 2 goals. I want to avoid pain and experience pleasure. There you go. And so we fight with these animals all the time. They're part of our consciousness, okay? But we do battle with them. These are our lower brain. Now the upper brain, you've got your neocortex with the prefrontal cortex, and this is where your rational brain is. This part of your brain thinks about your future. I gotta go right now, but I should not do it in the hall. Let's go to the restroom, okay? Because there'll be consequences if I just do it. Right, see, that's your upper brain that says, think about your future. Think about your future, and let's do behaviors that benefit us or our loved ones. That's your neocortex. And so this is your biological brain. Now, it turns out you also have something called a spirit. And the evidence to support that is never been higher, actually. With the internet, we've got a lot more people talking about their near-death experiences. And veridical perception, not only do we see this retrospectively, we now, or prospectively, or retrospectively, we also now have prospective evidence that it does exist. Veridical perception is when you have a patient who suffered cardiopulmonary arrest, and they report coming out of their body when they were gone. And sometimes they are actually able to describe events that there's no way they could have known about unless their consciousness had actually left their body. Was one example. We had a patient who was having heart surgery in her early 20s. During the procedure, she popped out of her body and was watching the surgeons for a while, and then she thought of her mother. As soon as she thought of her mother, she was in the waiting room, and she was watching as her mother, father, her mom's mom, and her dad's mom were all sitting there waiting for her in surgery. So while she's watching, her father stands up and gets himself a Milky Way bar. Then he comes back and he says to the other, he says, "I'm going into the parking lot to smoke a cigarette because this stress is really getting to me." So before he leaves, his mother says, "You know what? I'm coming too." And as they're walking out, his wife's mother says, "Hold up, I'll join you." And all three of them leave. Now, when the patient is revived, she goes back into her body, and then later when she comes out of surgery, she tells the surgeon, he says, "Is it possible to dream when you're having surgery?" And the surgeon goes, "No, it's not possible because your brain is isoelectric. There's no electricity in your brain. In order to dream, certain areas of your brain have to be stimulated and you're isoelectric." She goes, "Well, I don't know about that, but this is what happened to me." And so the surgeon goes, "Okay, I've heard, that's not the first time I've heard this. Talk to your family. Just talk to your family." So when the family comes into post-op, she goes, "Hey, Dad, did you go get a Milky Way bar and then go out for a cigarette? And did Grandma and Grandma go with you?" And this family was like, "How in the world did you know that? How in the world? I mean, you were in surgery. How could you possibly know that kind of detail?" Well, that's an example of veridical perception. And in the medical field, because I teach residents and medical students all the time, I tell them, watch out for this. You're going to see it. If you're a physician dealing with mortality in just about any setting, well, if you're a plastic surgeon, occasionally you might see it in plastic surgery, but actually, that does happen too sometimes. Anyway, you're going to see this. So be ready for it. It's called veridical perception because you're going to get a lot of cases of near-death experiences in medicine. You're going to hear that. You're going to see it here, where people will tell you when they died, what happened to them. But veridical perception is the evidence that your consciousness literally does leave your body and remains intact, away from the biological body. Now, this is the AWARE study. It was published in 2014. Sam Parnia was the lead investigator. It was published in the journal Resuscitation. Now, we had all these retrospective studies or reports of people demonstrating veridical perception. What they did here was they set up a prospective study where they looked at over 3,000 people that had cardiopulmonary arrest in 3 different hospitals. And they monitored them very carefully to see so that they had their electroencephalographic readings and everything, their heart monitor, so they knew, did they achieve isoelectric death, and then were there any cases of veridical perception? And it was a positive study. Yes, they got some veridical perception. Not a lot, but enough to say, this is a real thing. This is a real thing. So the evidence here is that in addition to your biological brain contributing to your consciousness, there is an extra component that is uniquely you that does appear to leave the body when that brain stops. Now the question is, if this is true, what is the value of a person? What is the value of a soul? Where does this come from? Does it come from the externals? Well, this isn't necessarily cute and smart and talented. Where does this value come from? And ultimately, intrinsic worth, that's a God thing. That's going to be a God thing. Either all people have worth, rich or poor, or it's extrinsic and it is assigned by people with extrinsic stuff. And one of the things that we talk about and we want patients to understand is that your value doesn't come in what you have. Okay, because if you have low education and don't have a lot of money and aren't very talented, does that really mean you're a loser? Because if you keep telling yourself you are a loser, then the likelihood of you getting better isn't very high. Having intrinsic value is very important to giving people hope to strive to do better. Okay? So that's one of the things that we have to deal with when people come in and have not had a lot of affection and have low self-worth. Building that up and trying to get them away from extrinsics and more into intrinsics is a part of getting them into a better place. All right. Now, when it comes to romantic love, everybody doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship in order for love relationships to be satisfied. Okay, that's they're very useful for that purpose, but not everybody is. Now, when there are perturbations in romantic, and that happens all the time, and this is a very common reason for people to come to us. Now, this is a complicated field. And I'm not going to get into everything on that one because this is not something I tend to do a lot with my patients. But I try to get people at least to understand that there is a lot of work involved, and men and women have different needs. And one of the things, there's a book called His Needs, Her Needs by Willard Harley. It's an old book now, but it's really, I try to encourage people to read it when they come in and they fight in my office, which I hate. I just love that when they come in and fight right there and try to make me the mediator. It's great. Thank you for that. That's what I signed up for, right? So anyway, one of the things I'd like them to do is please, listen to the audiobook, read the book, because it does give you some idea as to where some of these conflicts are coming from. Men and women have pretty much the same top 10 needs, but they have different lists. The top 5 are different for men and women. And part of getting along in romantic relationships is understanding what the opposite sex needs and then altering yourself to provide that. And when people put the other first, it makes it easier to remain in relationships, okay? So men and women aren't the same. That's important to understand that. And so some education is necessary here. Now, one thing that comes up here, and you hear this every now and then, if somebody says, you know what, man is not programmed for monogamy. It's too hard. And that's the excuse for affairs and things like that. It happens all the time. And you hear this, and the evidence that they provide is just look at the world. And I say, okay, if you look at the snapshot of the world right now, you might think that. However, if you take a look at the past, like take a look at 1950 and before, that was a different world entirely than what you are seeing right now. What you are seeing is a cultural anomaly. All right, this is a cultural anomaly, and you're coming to conclusions based on a cultural anomaly. If you were an alien exobiologist and you come to Earth and you are studying humanity, and so you're objective, because in talking about this subject, it's an emotional subject, it's a political subject, okay? And so people have very strong opinions based on, secondary gain issues a lot of times. Now, if you're an outside observer, an alien exobiologist, and you're asking the question, is man programmed to be monogamous or serial polygamous, which is kind of what we have going on right now. Okay, what is the evidence? Well, just watch TV, okay? Look at what's going on in families, and you'd come to the conclusion that, yeah, serial polygamy, one relationship after another, that seems to be the rule at this time in history. But as I mentioned, in 1950, the divorce rate was 3 per thousand. 3 per thousand. Today, it's about 450 per thousand. So we're looking at a cultural anomaly here. It's quite different. If you take a look at the class of 1907 and the class of 1977, they had a lot more in common than people today. One of the things that they had in common in the 70s and before is that when the high school student would think about their future or would start daydreaming, they daydreamed about one thing, okay? they're thinking about one day, I'm gonna find that one person, and just like my parents got married and that's gonna be me. I am gonna be the head of a family. I'm gonna have that special person, and that's awesome. And so they would get good feelings from imagining this future they were gonna have with that one person and that family. And so that was the motivation. I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna get myself a career, and I'm gonna get some money, I'm gonna move out of my parents' basement, and I'm gonna get a job, okay? And so that was a big motivation. The idea that, hey, of course I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna get my own family. Now keep in mind, back in those days, people stayed married, 3 in 1,000. It was like, it's like, wow. That was like, of course that's what's gonna happen. That's what everybody does. Now, one thing that's been lost, if you talk to our young people today, and this is very sad. I have to understand, this is an abrupt change. No longer do the majority of young people have a hope of that one person in that one relationship. The majority have lost that. That is absolutely catastrophic. That has never happened in any culture in human history. This is a new thing. This is a new, scary thing, all right? And they just don't. I mean, the idea is I'm gonna do just like my parents. They're gonna get married, split up, move on to the next relationship, split up, move to the next relationship, split up, until you're no longer attractive and nobody wants you, and then you're gonna die alone. There's your future, okay? And I believe that's contributing to the 33% increase in suicide since 2000. Okay, that and the drug problem, of course. But I think this contributes to the drug problem. So, you know, we used to sit around daydreaming about that special person. Well, they don't have that. And so so where's your pleasure? I mean, we got pleasure out of those daydreams, you know? So where you get pleasure? And they discover heroin and it's like, whoa, this feels pretty good. Way better than the hopeless misery the hopelessness that I've got going on. I mean, there's some way to get a good feeling. Yeah.
So it's not that they don't want that, it's just they don't think they can get that.
No, they don't think they can get it. No, it's just look around. Nobody gets that. What is the likelihood of that? So the alien exobiologist, you know, is going to do a little bit more detail. So he looks at what's going on right now. He looks at what's going on, what happened historically. Says, okay, let's take a look. Bless you. Look at all of mammals. Among all mammals, okay, how many are programmed for monogamy? Because some are programmed for serial polygamy and some are programmed for monogamy. Okay, there biologically are. Now, among mammals, only 3 to 5% are monogamous. 3 to 5%, so very few. Now, what does monogamy mean? They don't mate outside of their lifelong pair bonds with their mate. Now, they can, but they basically do not, for the most part. They do not. They mate with one mate, and that's the one they stick with, okay? All right, so now, black vultures, many bird species are monogamous, okay? So birds, there's quite a number of birds. Swans are the same way, are actually monogamous. Black vultures are religiously monogamous. I mean, if a black vulture gets caught cheating on their mate, other vultures will attack them and beat them senseless. Okay, so yeah, black vultures, they take that seriously, man. You don't mess with black vultures, man. You come here, oh man, we see you cheating, man. You're gonna get some, all right? So yeah, black vultures don't play.
What's their weapon of choice?
Yeah, they're wearing it. Prairie voles are also religiously monogamous. Male prairie voles, I mean, if a female that's not their wife comes around, and they make eyes at them, they will attack them. It's like, how dare you tempt me? You know, I got a wife, man, and they beat them up. Okay, so yeah, so some of these they're biologically extremely monogamous. All right. Now, these are some other mammals that are monogamous: gibbons, beavers, gray wolves, prairie voles, marmoset monkeys, California mice. That California mice, I'm going, California mice are monogamous? Really? Wow, of all, you know, yeah, maybe Texas mice, but California mice. All right. Now, one of the things that, if you take a look at these species, you have prairie voles, you have meadow voles, okay? Prairie voles are monogamous. Meadow voles mess around. Okay, and when you take a look at, this is where he first discovered the biological marker for monogamy has to do with arginine vasopressin receptors. In animals that are not monogamous, we see low levels of arginine vasopressin receptors in the reward centers of the brain, such as the nucleus accumbens. Okay, so if you take a look at the prairie vole, look at this black represents vasopressin receptors in the reward part of the brain. Big difference. Okay, and if you take and you do a hybrid and you make for a meadow vole, if you give it the genes for increased arginine vasopressin receptors, then they become more monogamous. All right, and so this is kind of your biological signal for monogamy. So if you're creating a species and you want it to be monogamous, what you do is you increase vasopressin and oxytocin receptor density in the reward centers of the brain. And what that does is it increases pair bonding. It increases pair bonding. So in response to oxytocin and vasopressin, you stick to that one. When you mate with a mate, you stick to that mate and you develop a very strong, affectionate bond, and you don't go outside that. Okay? Does that make sense? You understand how that works? Okay. All right. Which ones?
Exactly.
Arginine. Okay, so we have two pituitary neuropeptides that cause pair bonding. One is arginine vasopressin. Just remember vasopressin. It's also called antidiuretic hormone, but yeah, vasopressin and oxytocin.
The cuddle hormone.
Yes, the cuddle hormone. That's exactly right. Okay. Cuddle. Cuddle. Yeah.
I remember that word.
Yes. All right. So these affect social processes in mammals. These affect social processes in mammals because what happens is that with high levels of these receptors in the reward circuits, that means that being with that other entity gives them a big, happy, warm fuzzy, okay, that they don't get outside of that pair bonded thing. All right, there you go. All right. So I mentioned that we have monogamous behavior and then you have non-monogamous behavior, and they're promiscuous. These are not promiscuous, and again, it has to do with the neuropeptides in the reward parts of the brain. And I'm good at that. Okay. Now, one of the things, if you take a look at humans versus non-monogamous primates, you find some interesting things. All right, here we have prairie voles and montane voles, and we're looking at the vasopressin receptor. You have a long allele and a short allele. The short allele isn't very expressed, and so you don't get a lot. That's why you see a much lower amount of arginine vasopressin receptors, is because look at the size of the gene, it's very small. Whereas the prairie vole, you have a much larger, it's the long version, and so you're getting a lot more transcription here, okay? Now with humans and bonobos who are monogamous, not only do you have the arginine vasopressin receptor here that's the same as the chimpanzee, but in these monogamous ones, you've got this extra piece giving you a stronger boost, and so therefore higher densities of these receptors. And so what this tells you is that these monogamous species are programmed to be such because of these neuropeptides. These neuropeptides in the reward circuitry cause pair bonding, or they are implicated or important factors in providing for pair bonding. Okay? And you can see the tag, it's right there. Okay? All right.
So what are the benefits of the pair bonding
What are the benefits of the pair bonding?
that motivate that result?
Oh, well, what it does is that in response to oxytocin, and it binds to those receptors in the reward circuit, it activates reward from being with that mate. And so they get paid to be with them. They get a warm fuzzy. It's like when we hold a kitten, you experience some of that, or a puppy, you feel it. And that's where that's actually a reward. It's actually pleasure, like you ate a cupcake, okay? That it actually rewards you for that. Okay? Yeah.
I don't know when this was done, but is there going to be any studies, do you think, on differences between people's brains then that have those things in the genetics and now for the neuropeptide guys?
I can pretty much tell you nothing has changed. Our genetics has not changed. It would require, in order for a change like that, it would take. No, there's been no mutation in that very short time. I can guarantee you that. So nobody's looking at that. No, there has not been a change. It's a cultural change that's happened, but as far as a biological change, there has been no change. Yeah, that's just a blip, a microsecond to go in terms of biological history. Okay. Now, are you asking what are the social benefits? What are the benefits to the organism?
No.
No, so that's like about going back to yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where does survival fit in here? I mean, if I'm rewarded in being partnered with
Yeah.
somebody,
Right.
First of all, I'm choosing a partner.
Mhm.
I'm not taking anybody. Because
Right.
I can't trust everybody.
Exactly.
Again, it goes back to survival.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bond with somebody that's gonna advocate for my survival.
Right. So that's kind of, not only is that part of the reward, but as a mammal, the need for affection on a constant basis is there, and so that provides for that need. Remember, not all species need affection. Okay, if you take a look, for example, at cheetahs versus lions, All right, cheetahs, I mean, cheetahs, when they mate, do they stay together? Heck no. They don't stay together. They raise their young until the young are old enough to fight with mom for food. Once you fight mom for food, we're divorced. I never want to see you again. Leave home. Don't live in my basement. I'm not paying you anything. You have to go get your own place, get a job. All right, and you're gone. That's how cheetahs are, and they don't worry about it. Okay, they'll raise the kid as long as the kid behaves and doesn't fight mom for food. They can stay. The minute they fight mom for food, they're divorced, and cheetah goes on to find another guy to have another kid. Okay, they don't worry about it. They don't have a lot of affectionate needs, whereas other species do. And species with ongoing needs for affection seem to be encoded for this monogamy. Okay. All right. Now, here's the other side to this, which you have to think about very carefully. In all species that are, all mammal species, we have something necessary is affection for the child. Well, biologically, we have a mechanism to help ensure that the mom has affection for her baby, and it's through suckling. Mammary stimulation does what to oxytocin? Causes massive release, absolutely. That's the one mechanism of big-time, massive oxytocin release, which causes mom to bond with her infant. So it's not just that the infant is cute. The fact is, mom becomes bonded to her child because of the suckling phenomenon. Same thing happens in humans. Oxytocin is released with mammary stimulation, okay? Now, ask yourself this question. Is there any other species on planet Earth or Mars or any other planet where breast stimulation is a part of copulation? No. There's only one species in the known universe where coitus is associated with mammary stimulation.
So in humans,
Mhm.
is this one of the reasons why so many mothers have a difficult time when it comes to transitioning the child away from nursing?
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, I mean this is.
That effect happens. It's almost like a separation.
Yeah, it is kind of a separation because this was a chemical bonding was taking place. It was pleasurable. Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is a part of bonding, all right? And so the thing about it is, if you take a look at humanity as an engineered species, this engineer encoded into coitus mammary stimulation, which no other species on Earth is gonna look at that and say, what are you doing? It's like, what are you, a baby? What is wrong with you, okay? Every other species would say that because they don't have anything like that, only humans. Not chimpanzees, not rhesus monkeys, nothing. Nothing else does that. And so as an exobiologist, if you're taking a look at that and you're saying, wait a minute, this is a big deal. Not only do we have increased expression of vasopressin and oxytocin receptors, we have the oxytocin letdown process. It's been commandeered in coitus, which basically causes pair bonding. And so it's like a species seems to be programmed for pair bonding. So for those that say it's unnatural, I would beg to differ with that. And so if you're trying to justify, leaving one spouse and bouncing around and going on and on like that, it does damage to the love and belonging are what we're talking about here. Okay, we're trying to help people experience a fulfilled life. Number one thing we need is love and belonging. And if we're doing maladaptive behaviors, we're kicking that in the head. And so it's important to help people recognize, look, you're damaging yourself. You're damaging yourself. Biologically, no, you are not a dog. You're not, you're more like a gray wolf, okay? Not a dog. All right. All right, so the question to our patient with regard to love and belonging is, are there people in my life that see me as family on some level? Does anybody have affection for me as a person, and not just because what they get from me? I'm not buying them drugs. They're not getting status from hanging around me, okay? But does anyone actually care about me for me? This is what you want to know about the patient. Do they have, what's going on socially? Do they have bonding to anybody? Do they belong with anybody? When we dream, very rarely are we alone in our dreams. Man is not an isolated creature. We don't do well in isolation. All right, so that's it for love and belonging. Yeah.